everyone, it's Meg, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some books I have read recently. I have done a video like this previously and I'm doing this instead of doing monthly wrap-ups because I literally read about 2 books a month and that's kind of a waste of a video. So I go into these videos, like I said in my previous video, where I have maybe 5 or 6 books so I can talk to you guys about them and give you bit more of an in-depth review and kind of expand upon my thoughts. I have 6 books that I'm going to talk to you guys about today, so without further ado, let's get into the video. The first book that I have is 10 Things I Can See From Here by Carrie Mack. I have been wanting to read this book ever since it came out in 2017 because of the synopsis. This book is about a girl named, is it Marv or Maeve? One or the other. I think it's Marv, but I may be wrong. And it's basically about Marv as she goes to live with her dad for 6 months whilst her mother is away in Haiti. And one of the main topics apart from that is the fact that Marv has severe anxiety, and that is mainly why I wanted to pick this book up, because as somebody who also suffers with anxiety, it's also really nice to discover books that you feel like you can really relate to. This is also an LGBTQ+ book because Marv likes girls and there is a girl and girl romance which is absolutely adorable. I was so excited for this book. I was on a real high after the book that I read beforehand and I was just so ready to dive in, but I didn't like this book as much as I thought I was going to, which I'm really upset by. The first thing that I found about this book is that it is extremely triggering, or I personally found it very triggering. I nearly put it down at one point because I felt like it was making me so anxious and I just couldn't carry on with it, but I did. So if you do feel like this book is going to trigger you, just please be aware of that before going into it, because personally in my experience I did find it to be very triggering. Trigger count. You should do a count of how many times I say trigger. And I didn't love all of the characters in here. I wasn't a big fan of Marv's dad. He was kind of a bit of a jerk, really. There was one part of this book where Marv talks about her parents' views on medication and why they won't let her have medication, and that really annoyed me personally. It's kind of those moments where you're like, what? Seriously? Like, I did not agree with it at all, and that really irritated me. I nearly DNF'd this book at one point because I was just getting really, not exactly bored, but a bit fed up with it, but I pulled through and in the end I did really enjoy it towards the end. I love Marv's relationship with Salix. I think it was adorable, even though I felt like it was maybe a bit too slow because the relationship only really started to happen towards the end of the book. But in this, I like how when Marv is in a relationship with Salix, Salix doesn't magically fix Marv and her illness. She helps her and supports her through it, and she doesn't put any pressure on her, and she's just kind of a very caring and supportive person in terms of Marv and her mental illness, which I really liked. I did like Marv's stepbrothers a lot as well, and her stepmother. I thought they were nice, lovely. I did like what I saw of Marv's mother as well, even though she wasn't really a super main character in this book. But overall, I did enjoy it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, I believe. Like I said, I did have a couple of issues with it, and even though it was kind of a bit of a bumpy ride reading it, and I'm just really glad that I finally got to read it. The next book that I have is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you have not heard of this book, welcome to BookTube. Everybody has been raving about this even before it came out, and this is one of the few times that I've actually pre-ordered an extremely hyped book before it came out. So I was trying really hard to not let the hype get to me, and it did. I'm not gonna lie, it did get to me. I was trying to stay away from people's reviews and thoughts and everything, but on Instagram and on YouTube it's pretty hard to do that. My opinions probably would have been slightly different, hopefully probably a bit more positive if I hadn't let the hype get to me. This is basically about a rock band called Daisy Jones and the Six which is set in the 1960s and 70s, and it's about their rise and fall to fame, basically. It is told in an interview format, which I was not expecting going into it, but it was also quite refreshing because I've never read a book in that style before. This is also my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and I am actually listening to Evelyn Hugo on audiobook right now. And so obviously there's a lot of expectation because Evelyn Hugo was also an extremely hyped book, but I feel like the hype has ever so slightly gone down now, so I don't have as much expectations going into it. But I did love this book. I love watching documentaries and reading books about like 60s and 70s rock bands. It's something that really interests me, and like Queen is my favourite band and they are also from that era, so and I just love rock and roll in general, and I really loved that aspect and kind of knowing the behind the scenes of the band, and the amount of research that must have gone into this is amazing. So I love the detail and all the different characters and everything. There's nothing negative I have to say about it really. I gave this a 4 out of 5 star because I really enjoyed it, but I didn't love it as much as everybody else did. Probably because the hype got to me and I had such high expectations, even though I didn't want to have any at all going into reading this book. And I heard that the audiobook is amazing because it's a full cast, and I feel like most people who listen to the audiobook gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So I will have to try the audiobook at some point if I can get my hands on it. But I did really enjoy this book, and I'm glad that it was my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book, especially because of the subject matter, and it's something that I'm really interested in. I'm just a bit gutted that the hype got to me really, but if I give it a reread or listen to the audiobook, then hopefully I can actually bump it up to that 5 star because I really want to like it as much as everybody else does. The next book that I have read recently is The Secret Diary of Lizzie Bennet by Kate Rorick and Bernie Sue. This is the companion novel to the Lizzie Bennet YouTube diaries, which is basically a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, where Lizzie is a vlogger. And this was a reread for me. I read it back in 2017 and I found it in my local Waterstones. I never knew the book existed. I'm so glad that it exists because it is wonderful. This gives so much more detail and expands on the story of the Lizzie Bennet diaries, and just gives it a whole new perspective, and I find just the series and this book in general so utterly fascinating. In this book you get to know more about Lizzie's parents, and you get to see more of Darcy and Bing and Caroline, and I also think it's an extremely clever book. I think it's one of the best Pride and Prejudice adaptations that I've ever read, and I love how they kind of intertwine the aspect of being a vlogger and what the reality is like for the vlogger, like the kind of rise to fame and what consequences and positives there are on putting your life out there, and some personal aspects of your life on the internet, and how everything is there forever, I guess, and also where to draw the ethnical line on when it comes to sharing content on the internet. As if you have, I'm not going to spoil this book, but if you have read the bit towards the end, then you will see what I'm talking about in that. And I also really love how the Bennet sisters are such strong and independent women. They're ambitious, they want to go and conquer the world and do great things, and I love having that aspect in it instead of in the traditional Pride and Prejudice and guy coming and saving the day, and it's not quite the same as that. And I love how they kind of are able to have their own voices and to make their own choices and create their own path, I guess, in life. And you also get to see a deeper meaning on the Bennet sisters and their parents. You get to see the dynamics and how the authors have created a so much more in-depth family dynamics. You get to see the relationship between, obviously Mrs. Bennet, it has a certain reputation in Pride and Prejudice, but you get to see that she does really care about her daughters, not just the fact that she wants them marrying off. She wants them to have a good life, and she really does care about them. And the same with Mr. Bennet as well. You get to see the relationship, especially between Lizzie and himself, and I absolutely adore it. And if you are a Pride and Prejudice fan, please go and read this book. You will not regret it. I annotated it this time, and I've run out of tabs for funny bits because Lizzie's humour is amazing. It is my sort of humour, dry and just really sarcastic. So I'm going to finish tabbing this once I eventually get more tabs, but I love this book. It brings me so much joy, and this will be one that I will forever be rereading and cherishing because I love it so, so much. So of course I had to give this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next books that I have on this list are part of a series, and that is Blue Lily Lily Blue and The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. The second book in this series, The Dream Thieves, was actually the book that put me in my reading slump towards the end of the year, which really, really sucked, and I almost didn't carry on with this series because even though I did enjoy the first book, I felt like I really struggled to connect with the writing style, and it just didn't mesh with me very well. But I was so intrigued about the story and about how it was going to end, because this whole subject matter was just fascinating. So I decided to give the audiobooks a go, and it was definitely the right path for me. I loved the narrator for this. I can't remember his name, but he was awesome. I loved the voices that he did, and his voice was it was like calming but haunting and captivating, and I felt like he did definitely do some distinct voices for each character, which I really liked, and it just held my attention a lot better, and I felt like I could be more invested with the story, and probably not having to physically read them definitely and listen to it instead probably helped me follow along with the writing style a lot better. Obviously I can't spoil it for you guys, but I am definitely glad that I carried on with this series, since I really didn't feel like it after reading the second book. But I love all the characters. I love Blue and Gansey and just all of them, and the new characters that were brought into it, and it brought me lots and lots of joy in the end, and I am definitely, like I said, really glad that I ended up finishing them. So I gave both books 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I have recently read is Anne of Windy Willows by L.M. Montgomery. This is the 4th book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and I'm slowly making my way through. I am currently reading the 5th book, and it is definitely one of my favourite series of all time. I'd like to think most people watching this video, or if you're on BookTube, have heard of the series, but if you don't, it's basically about an orphan girl named Anne who comes to live with the Cuthberts on Prince Edward Island, and it's kind of basically a story about her growing up, and through each book as it goes along in the series shows Anne as she grows up and what she does with her life, and how she grows into a young woman. I won't talk too much about the plot of this book because spoilers, but in this book Anne is around 21. She starts off being around 21, and the book finishes when she's around 24, 25, something along those lines. And it is such a lovely book. I really enjoy it whenever I get to go back into the world of Anne and Avonlea and just be reunited with the characters again. It is such a joy. I always love reading these books around springtime because it just gives me the spring vibe, like spring or autumn is just awesome. And I love some of the prose that are in here and how Montgomery describes the surroundings. It makes me want to go and live on Prince Edward Island. I do actually want to go and live on Prince Edward Island. That would be amazing. And I also love seeing how, even though Anne is grown up, she still has that magical childlike aspect to her, which I absolutely love. She does not lose her imagination and her childlike playfulness, and I really, really enjoy that about her. The only issue that I've realised fairly recently that I have with the Anne of Green Gables books, more so this one, some of the other ones, and the one that I am reading now, there is a lot of monologue from certain characters, and I feel like it's just so unnecessary. It doesn't really add, generally it doesn't add much to the story, and it goes on and on for ages. And I also feel like the characters who have such long amounts of speech and text, they are kind of all the same. Like, they're always maybe slightly negative and slightly a bit cautious, or they kind of talk about it's like superstition, or they're kind of hopeful and doubtful. Like, they have the very similar personalities, and they also talk about people that you have never heard of in the book before, and there's all these tiny characters that are mentioned once in a paragraph, and it just gets a little bit confusing at times, and I just feel like it is totally unnecessary. But nonetheless, that is the only downside that I have to these books. I just feel like some of the monologue and some of the prose are far too long and unnecessary. But apart from that, I absolutely adore this series so much, and I'm nearly at the end of it now, which is really, really sad. After the book that I'm reading now, I have maybe two books around, which is really gutting, but this will definitely be a series that I constantly go back to and reread, and I am so looking forward to just enjoying it and returning to this series from year after year. And the last book that I have to share with you guys is Are We All Lemmings and Snowflakes by Holly Bourne. This is my first Holly Bourne book that I've ever read. I have been wanting to read something from her in a while, and as soon as I heard about this book, I knew I had to pick it up. This is basically a book about a girl named Olive who goes to something called a reset camp, which is basically an intense therapy course for young people struggling with mental illness. And that is kind of all you really need to know about this book. There are a lot of trigger warnings for this book, so make sure that you check out the Goodreads page for this book before going into it if you feel like you may be affected by some of the issues discussed in this. I'm not quite sure what to say about this book, I must admit. I have been really looking forward to reading it ever since I bought it back in January, and I read it really fast. I read it in about a week, which is very good for me, and I did enjoy it. I feel like Olive was one of those characters where she was likeable to a certain extent, but she was also dislikable. She was flawed. That's probably how I described it. She is a very imperfect and flawed character, which is really nice to see because it shows that everyone isn't always perfect. And I can't speak for the majority of the illnesses discussed in this book. I can't speak for the representation, but I feel like it did discuss mental health in a very honest way, and also kind of talks about society's view on mental health, and also kind of about how it affects young people as well. There were one part of the plot that I didn't really understand. I can't talk because of spoilers, but it was kind of a part of the plot where it made sense at first and then they changed it to something else. And for some reason it just kind of confused me a little bit. I don't know why, but it did. I did enjoy the writing style. It was easy to follow, and I did enjoy quite a lot of the characters and the sense of humour that they used in it. I'm not really 100% sure what to say, but that is kind of my opinion. I did definitely enjoy it, and the ending was not at all how I expected it was going to be. But then again, that's quite nice that it wasn't wrapped up in a pretty little parcel the way you think books would generally end up in, and it kind of shows that mental illness isn't something that just automatically stops. Like, it's a progression, it's a journey that is not linear at all. There are ups and downs and good days and bad days, and it kind of shows that the characters in this book, it is an ongoing journey for them to recovery. And even though, like I said, the ending wasn't what I expected, I was quite pleased with how pleasantly surprised by how I liked it and how it wrapped up. So yeah, I will definitely be reading more of Holly's work in the future, and I did love this book, not maybe as much as I was hoping to, but I definitely really enjoyed it. And if you are looking for a good mental health book, then I would definitely recommend this. So overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I have read recently. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you enjoy me doing these recently read videos in general, and it's nice to be able to just sit down with you guys and chill and just talk about the books that I've been reading and to kind of go a bit more in depth and share my views on them. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more bookish videos from me, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll be noted every time I post a new video. As always, I will leave the links to my social media along with my Goodreads and blog in the description down below for you guys. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!